everyone, and welcome to another project with Frocks and Frolics. Today we're going to sew a little girl's bag called Mary Lou bag. There are 5 different ways to put the bag together. 2 of them include zip insertions and 3 of them don't. So in order to find the right bag for you, I would suggest that you watch the introductory video, and the link to that can be found at the end of this video. Here we're going to sew a very simple version of the Mary Lou bag. It's got laminated handles and a laminated flap, and I've put a bow in the front simply because I actually forgot to put the fastening in when I needed to, so I had to put it in afterwards, and of course you could see it from the outside, so I put a bow over it, so you can always help yourself when you make slight little mistakes. And now I actually really like the bow on top. I've put the same lining in as I've used as a contrast. We haven't got a base at the bottom of the bag, but we have got top stitching, and of course we create the beautiful shaping here. So let's get started on our lovely bag. I am using volume fleece, even though I have got quite a firm laminate already, but you could leave it off, that's up to you. I'm using an iron-on vinyl for my handles and the flap. This is my very thick fabric I'm using for the shell, and a really funky lining. That's also my contrast. I've got some matching yarn and a magnetic fastener. Let's have a look at the pattern pieces. First of all, we need to cut our volume fleece twice and the lining twice from the lining pattern. Then we are doing the top and the lower half of the bag twice each, and for the flap I'm using twice the polka dot. I also need it in my iron-on vinyl and my iron-on volume fleece. You can put in a bag base, but I'm leaving it. We've got the handle, which we need twice in the iron-on vinyl and twice in the contrast fabric. So let's start with the handles. The iron-on vinyl is going to be taken off its paper backing and placed onto the right side of the fabric with a sticky side down, and then simply ironed on. Really take your time for that, don't overheat, but make sure that you do it for 8 seconds in every position, otherwise the stuff will crinkle up and it won't look as nice. I actually found the more I did this, the braver I got and the longer I left the iron on. So you do that twice, and then once it's ironed on, it looks like this. Now we iron it again from the other side to make sure it's really securely on there. I've also done my flap, and I can now also put the volume fleece on the flap with a rough gluey side facing downwards. And lots of steam, please, otherwise it won't stick, and you might have to put either a cloth over it or iron it from the right side of the fabric. Now let's put on our fastening. Don't be confused because I'm using a different fabric here. It's because I forgot to put it in the first place. So snip where the markings are, where your little feet go, and then press it through from the right side. Put the little plate over the top and then force the little arms apart so that your fastening is securely in there. Now we can put our flap together, so right sides facing. Obviously one of them that would have now got the fastening in it, but I obviously forgot. So now I'm sewing around and I'm taking the volume fleece as my guide here. 2 stitches, then needle down, lift up the presser foot and move the fabric around, otherwise you're not going to get a really nice curve. Cut back your seam allowances to about 3 to 4 millimeters. And then top stitch it. Now we want to do the handles. So you fold the handle over in half and then in half again. And you can press this, but you do need to make sure that you've got something over the top, either the paper or cloth. I've also pinned it additionally. And then you just want to Top stitch it all the way around. Make sure that the edges are on top of each other. When you get to the lower part, just put your needle down, lift your presser foot, turn and come back up the other way. After which you can iron it again to make them nice and smooth. Now let's do the lower part of the bag. Make sure that you've got the snips in your fabric so that you know where to put your flap and your handles. Put the flap in the center and the handles on either side, and then we're going to top stitch this in place on the sewing machine. Because you've got your snips, there's no need to pin this first. You just put it under and then sew across. Now we can attach the upper part to the lower part, 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way across. My fabric's actually really brilliant. It looks a little bit like leather. I've never seen this before like that. I wasn't sure it'll look good at all. Really impressed with it. So now we can have the seam allowance facing down and top stitch it. It's a shame I can't find any more of this fabric, otherwise I would have put a link into my website so that you could get the same stuff. Anyway, I'm still looking for it, so you never know, a link might pop up at some stage. And then you top stitch all the way across, so it's really nice and structural. Next we're going to iron on our volume fleece. So that needs to be ironed on again with a cloth over it, so that you can iron it from the wrong side. If you've got laminate, you don't want to iron on that. And I'm cutting back my seam allowances on the volume fleece so that it doesn't end up in the actual seam allowance. That would make it very thick. So you can see me here putting a cloth over it, iron from either side with lots of steam, and then it's going to sit really lovely. Different fabric again, because as I said, I forgot to put my fastener in. So the fastener wants to sit right on the seam or right below it or above it. That depends really where you want your flap to go. But anywhere there's fine, as long as it's right in the center between the two handles. Put 2 snips in again. They need to sit exactly where your arms are going to be, of course. So depending on how big it is, that of course depends where you do your snips. And then the plate goes over the top, force the arms apart, and you've got your fastening inserted. With that done, we're going to close the lower seam, our base, all the way across, 1 centimeter seam allowance. You can't really iron the stuff apart when it's laminated. If you're using stiff linen, of course you could. So I iron this apart with my fingers, and then I'm top stitching it on either side with a stitch length of 3.5 all the way down, needle down, turn, come back up the other side. And that gives it somehow like a bit more of a professional look. I quite like that. I like top stitching on all of the seams, but it's a bit hard to get in. There are different methods for this, of course. So if you want to watch the elephant bag, I'm showing you how to do it the other way around. So that looks really nice and kind of very professional now. And I can close my side seams. Again, we have a 1 centimeter, and we do the same on our lining. We'll close the side seams, and then while we're there, obviously we also close the base seam. But in this instance, we are going to leave a closing gap so we can get our hand in. 1 centimeter seam allowance, line it up. Don't forget to leave the gap on the base. You need that so you can turn your bag. It's best really to iron the seams apart. If you have a laminated fabric, that's a bit difficult. You can't really do it. Just do it with your fingers. This is not really a problem. Then we open out the corners, and we are going to stitch straight across here, Make sure that is nice and flat though, so it does look really nice. It's very easy to have this push out and get a sort of like a little nose. You can see it here. I've got that little nose, so I'm taking out my pin and I'm pulling the fabric down, watch it, so that it lies flat. There you go. That's quite important, and when I did this in my sewing classes, this is the bit which went wrong most, and then it looks kind of odd from the outside and you have to like cut it back on the inside. So take your time with this. So it really is a very nice line across. Now what you want to do is tuck in your handles, and we're going to turn our lining so it's right side to the outside, and we stick that inside the bag so it's right side to right side. That's really important that the outer bag is on the outside here, because the lining is actually a little bit smaller than the outside and you're never going to get it together if you work the other way around. So we're going to sew this all the way around the top now. And you also want to put one hand, the left hand if you're right-handed, at the back and pull the fabric a bit so that it goes in very smoothly. I'm not doing that here. It wasn't really necessary with this fabric, but most fabrics it will be. And in other videos you will see me do this. So now I can turn my bag inside out. We're almost done really. All we have to do now is get a really nice edge. So fiddle the edge out, and if you have got a laminate that you can pin, because it's quite an expensive one, it's like a cloth one which has got an acrylic coating, then you can pin it. Otherwise you should use clips. And then I am top stitching this again foot width, and that gives me like a really nice professional look. Don't forget that your stitch length has to be 3.5 again, otherwise it will look really dinky and small and homemade. And you can see how nice the rim sits with the lining being that tiny little bit smaller. So you can see here I've made that huge mistake, so I'm putting my bow on it afterwards. Of course you won't make that because I'm showing you how to do it correctamundo. So there's a video how to make the bow as well on the project page, so not to worry. But this is a bit different to the video. You turn these in and then I actually sew it on first before I gather up through the middle. I think that's a little bit easier because all you have to do then is wrap it around and not hold it in your hands. It's quite nice. Well, you live and you learn, don't you? But the video is fairly much the same. Tuck your bits in and sew them too, and as you can see here it's like really sharp, my bag in the background, and what I'm actually doing wasn't. So we have done our bag, we've got beautiful lining. All we need to do now is to close that lining. Seams need to sit on top of each other, and then really close to the edge. You want to sew this down. It might actually help if it was the right color as well, but if you're a little bit like me, sometimes I really can't be bothered. So very close to the edge and your bag's done. And now we can admire our handiwork. Bag is finished. I think this material was really fabulous. It was stiff and it was soft at the same time. Really beautiful to work with as well. So this is the funky red bag. If you want to see how the other bags are made and take it to a different level, watch my introductory video first so you can see what the differences are, how the pattern is actually assembled. So watch that first, and thank you for watching all the way to the end. Bye!